Hello, I'll be presenting my final year thesis, Public by Design Municipal Market Architecture as a Framework to Shape the Public Realm. For as long as humankind has built cities, we have needed civic architecture, places to manage our cities, to dispense justice, to converse with fellow citizens, to relax and enjoy art and culture, and even to reconnect with nature. Public realm has always been and will continue to be a vital part of the life of the city. For municipal architecture to truly identify as civic, there needs to be a blend of strong sociocultural aspect and a sense of architectural identity to it. The municipal architecture that is being built today lacks the same. These buildings become disconnected objects in the context performing its bare minimum role in the society. They even lack the aesthetic appeal when it comes to human perception. Several such mediocre buildings exist in the case of Borivali. Borivali is a part of suburban district of Mumbai. It is one of the important halts along the railway network of the Mumbai. Borivali sits between the Sanjay Gandhi National Park and Gorai Creek, which extends from Arabian Sea. The significant architecture in the surrounding includes the Kanheri Caves, which date back to 1st century, Immaculate Conception Catholic Church building from the late 16th century, and semi-public housing built by Charles Correa for Life Insurance Corporation of India in 1970s. Due to the rapid development of suburban areas in the last 3 decades, today Borivali is as culturally diverse as any other region of the metro city. The Borivali railway station area is most active part of the region, a city center in a way. This is also the area which has the clusters of municipal buildings that are part of the context for this thesis. The primary site analysis was to understand the public nature of the site, what causes the density, what makes it the public hotspot of the region. Various transit networks such as local bus, local train, cabs, and vehicular traffic collide with each other. As against that, there are public buildings such as railway station, court, police station, market, which act as the primary forces of the site, which finally results in the high concentration of human density in the area. And the site is not equipped to handle such a heavy form of of movement. What struck me the most on the site was that these municipal buildings exist in the form of various clusters. They were not built at the same time but were planned together as a program. The study further goes into analyzing these clusters. The primary clusters consists of the municipal market, police station and police housing, magistrates court, and the post office. All these buildings are divided by two main alleys, which stimulate the primary pedestrian and vehicular movement in the cluster, namely the court alley and the market alley. The secondary cluster consists of municipal school, a theatre, library, and art gallery space. All these buildings are divided by a compound wall. This cluster is away from the station area, hence the density is lesser. As the cluster 1 is more public and crucial, the study further narrows down the site context to BMC market area. It has potential to transform into well organized and unique to context kind of a public space. The market currently functions in and out of the building. The formal market takes place inside the building, whereas informal market takes place both inside and outside the current building. The market lane is a place for the informal market, loading unloading of the goods, vehicular and pedestrian movement, entry and exits to the adjacent civic buildings, and seasonal festivals. It results into overcrowding and traffic congestion in the street versus almost being vacant inside the building. This is an archival of volume of the market alley as it swells and shrinks throughout the day. Especially during the festivals, the market alley reaches its maximum capacity. Further analyzing the BMC market building structure, this structure was built in 1968. The typical low cost and easily built steel trussed structure, which is common for municipal market typology of that time. The traces of the same can be seen in in the few remaining old structures, market structures, in other suburban parts of the city, namely in Goregaon and Khar railway station area. So the strategy is to redesign the current municipal market accompanied by additional programs such as recreational spaces, learning spaces and working spaces with better connectivity to the existing infrastructure and better pedestrian friendly public movement. The initial process of designing included study of historical Noli plans to understand the relationship between open and built spaces, creating various geometries responding to the context, volumetric and detailed models at various scales, and finally, number of hand-drafted planar drawings to make the volumetric ideas into architectural representation language. This is a volumetric representation of final design strategy. The building responds to the immediate context buildings such as the police station, court, and railway station. The building connects to the existing skywalk to stimulate a better pedestrian movement on the upper level. The building volumes are divided by alleys and walkways further to make the ground floor more accessible and pedestrian friendly. Green space on the upper terraces is connected by pedestrian bridges, which form courtyard spaces in the central alley. This is a knowledge representation of the existing versus proposed volume of the BMC market building. One is the monolithic. One is the existing monolithic volume versus the second, which is proposed, is the market alley forming by many volumes coming together. This is an exploded axonometric view of all the floors with assigned programs, namely from bottom to top, the new municipal market, retail shops, learning zones, and two floors for offices. This is a proposed site plan. The drawing orientation is north up. The building sits on the east west axis of the um, western Borivali, right outside the Borivali railway station. The ground floor plan is proposed for new BMC market. Entire service road and loading unloading bay is proposed at the backside of the building so that there is a clear division between the pedestrian and vehicular access. The actual market is divided into various blocks which are assigned for specific usage uh, such as provisional stores, vegetables or fruits versus the uh, fish and meat blocks. In addition to the formal shops and seller platforms inside each block, there is a provision for all the informal market to happen. Uh, there is a provision for all the informal market to happen in the alley. For informal markets, sitting platforms are designed along the inner walls of the market alley, inspired by traditional Otla system. Canteen and resting areas are provided for the hamals and other workers of the market. The first floor plan is proposed for retail. The floor has retail shops. Circulation is through the main corridor. The public corridor is further. The public corridor is further extending into the green terraces, which are specifically designed for the recreational purposes. These open spaces act as green corridors as one passes from one point of the building to the another. Four staircases have been provided along the linear form of the building. The corridor also extends to connect to the existing skywalk to stimulate the pedestrian movement through the building coming to and from the railway station. The second floor plan is proposed for learning zone. The floor has learning spaces such as classrooms, library and assembly and conference hall. The circulation is through the main corridor. The corridor becomes the major circulation device as well as the most public and active part of the floor. Library and assembly halls are at the rear end of the building as to give more privacy from the hustle and bustle of the station side of the building. Third floor plan is proposed for offices. The floor has various units of office models. These models are mainly small and medium sized, meant for local small scale businesses in the region. It has lobby on the rear end of the building, which acts as the buffer between the more public corridor and the more private offices. The semi-open tilted glass partition has been provided on the corridors to reflect the external noise from the market and to add aesthetic value to the walking experience of the corridor. The fourth floor plan is to propose for offices. The floor has mainly larger units of the office models. These models are designed for large scale local business region. A semi open tilted glass partition has been provided on the corridors to reflect the external noise from the market. So this section cuts through the initial part of the building, cutting through the service road, loading and loading bay, provisional stores blocks, and informal market platforms and pedestrian street, respectively. The upper floor consists of retail, learning, and offices zones. The skywalk can be seen in the elevation, which basically connects to the building on the first floor um, as one goes further to the east of the building. This section cuts through the second part of the building, cutting through the cutting through the service road, loading and unloading bay, the vegetable and fruit selling block, the pedestrian street, respectively. The upper floors consist of retail, learning, offices, and a roof terrace. This section cuts through the third and last part of the building, cutting through pedestrian street, um, cutting through the pedestrian street, the meat selling block, uh, the slaughter room and driver's restrooms, and the service road, respectively. On the upper floors consists the upper floors consist of retail, learning, and offices, as well as the uh, double-heighted semi-open lobby um, on the third floor. 3D representation of the southern facade of the building as seen from the roof garden on the first floor level. 3D representation of a market alley on the ground floor as seen from the corner of the same. The highlighted yellow platforms are informal market spaces, and the central alley is completely pedestrian. Um, this is a 3D representation of the service road and the loading and unloading bay on the ground floor as seen from above. The 3D representation of office corridor on the third floor, which with the semi-open glass partition and alive with public activity throughout the day. 3D representation of uh, of the overall building as seen from above. One can see the surrounding civic buildings as part of the same cluster. Circulation and service route. So the first diagram highlights the pedestrian zone on the ground floor. The second diagram highlights the circulation on the upper levels. The diagram highlighting the third diagram is highlighting the garbage collection route on the ground floor, which is basically the service road on the backside of the building. And the fourth diagram highlights the loading unloading bay, which is connected to the service road on the backside of the building. The FSI calculations. Total permissible FSI is 4, and total FSI that is consumed for this particular project is 0.3129. So the first 3D diagram highlights the water supply network. Water coming from the main water line uh, from the western side, Link Road, where the primary water line is. Second 3D diagram represents the the second 3D diagram highlights the main drainage line going towards the east of the site, that is SV Road, whereas the main drainage where the main drainage line is. The building has two toilet blocks. The drawing shows the typical plans of two toilet blocks on each floor. On a single floor, two sets of both male and female compartments with handicap toilets have been provided. There is a green roof detail of the roof terrace on the first floor. This sits on the top of the two market blocks. It is completely open and accessible for the pedestrians. Rainwater harvesting technology. As the city gets 4 months of rainfall, a sustainable system is introduced where some of the columns carry water from the terrace to the collection tank. These hollow RCC columns with a water carrying pipe in between. The top The top curved capital look of the column gives an aesthetic definition to the overall elevation of the building as well as it supports the big RCC roof. Sectional details. This sectional detail includes the front facade of the building, which passes through the corridors and the central market alley. It further it details the parapet wall, the glass partition, and the steel and the glass railing on the upper floors, and the informal market platforms of the ground floor. Uh, Basement parking details. All the parking is provided at the basement level, which this the basement basically includes 20 heavy vehicle slots, 35 car slots, and 7 handicap slots. Advanced slab details for the top slab of the building has been introduced in the design to decrease the overall weight of the slab and additional aesthetic appeal. The central shaft of the slab is hollowed out by waffles as the column capitals need the planar surface area on the edges of the slab. The sun shading diagrams during the summer and winter. Facade elevation, which the facade elevation diagram represents the heating of the floor surface using the contrast color scheme. And finally, the sun path curve representations that helped in designing the building. I'd like to conclude the presentation with this statement. What we do to our public spaces, we ultimately do to ourselves. Thank you.